The vote is 8-4, 0 against. We have now come to the portion of our meeting where we hear from speakers to specific agenda items. However, we have no registered speakers today. The board will now adjourn to closed session under Chapter 551 of Texas Government Code, Open Meetings Act, subsections 004.071.072.073, .074, .076, .082, .081, .083, .084, and .089. Should board final action, vote, or decision on any matter considered in the closed session be required, such final vote, action, or decision shall be taken at the open meeting covered by this notice upon the reconvening of the public meeting or at a subsequent meeting of the board upon notice thereafter. The board is adjourned and to close session at 5:05 p.m. This meeting is now reconvened in open session. The time is 6:09 p.m. Our first order of business is to hear the superintendent's update to the board. Superintendent House, please begin.
Yes, ma'am, I do have a few updates. And first of all, I hope everyone had a pleasant holiday and safe travels to and from wherever they may have gone. Of course, a couple things that I wanted to mention. The most recent, of course, is a Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals decision that happened yesterday. This particular case was temporarily halted, the enforcement of a federal injunction against Governor Greg Abbott's execution or executive order, that seeks to prohibit public school districts from mandating wearing face masks. Pending the court's full review of the matter, the ruling does not, and I want to repeat, it does not impact the requirement that students, staff, and visitors must wear masks while on HISD property. So in short, the case that we saw yesterday that many people had questions about in the press is something that's much different than what we were dealing with. Of course, while we were heartened that we have maintained the lowest rate of COVID-19 cases in the state and vaccinations are available for a majority of our school-age students, we will remain vigilant in terms of our mask mandate. We will review all the data and the trends related to COVID-19 after the holidays, as we've indicated, and through the first semester of classes to determine if any changes need to happen in reference to our safety protocols. So I wanted to make sure that that was clear. We did send out a press release just a couple of hours ago as well to make sure our community was up to speed. Also yesterday, as just an FYI, we had our first in-person principals meeting. What I can tell you is that to have nearly 300 people in a very large space, let me make that clear, very, very large space that we were able to rent out and accommodate and then have breakout sessions. There was electricity in the room. Principals were really energized. I was excited to have my first opportunity after nearly 6 months to address that group for the first time. So very, very exciting. We had a chance to celebrate them for all the hard work that we've seen from them on a consistent basis this school year. But more importantly, we focused, especially during those breakout sessions, on building capacity and making certain that we build stronger administrators. So very exciting times. It's a piece that we really have been looking forward to, and it's something that we will do on a continuum as we continue with additional principals meetings moving forward. We do have a couple of new staff members that have joined us, and I don't know if Dr. Bird is with us today. I believe this week will be his first week. If Dr. Bird is here, he can say, and Dr. Sean Bird is our new CAO, and Dr. Bird will be with us the next time we meet, so you have a chance to see him in the person. We also do have a new individual that has joined us, is Char Bradford. Is she here? I saw her here earlier. She stepped out, and she's heading up our Special Pops department, population department. So we want to welcome her as well once we have the opportunity to see both of those individuals. We did bring on a new chief talent officer also, and Jeremy will be starting with us in January. So very excited about closing the loop on our team. During our principals meeting, of course, before the meeting, we have a chance to bring together a group of about 28 principals that are kind of our leadership council that I meet with. We bring different items to, they bring different items to us, and we talk about those items. A couple of the items that we talked about to ensure that we got their feedback, one was library books. And out of that meeting, we decided that, and we all decided this together, principals as well as myself, administration, that we would provide a unified process of what we already do to ensure that we have the safest, best selection. And I want to preference that, there very well could be something that slips through the cracks. And if that does happen in reference to our libraries or library books, we'll deal with those situations individually. But we have a process in place where we're vetting those books. We're going to explain that process and send something out next week. Same thing in reference to CRT. We had that conversation as well. We're providing insight and kind of talking points to make sure that we're all speaking the same language. One of the things that principals brought to the table that I thought was very important is that they indicated, Mr. House, we feel like we should describe to the community what CRT is and make certain that we share that we don't necessarily focus on any type of theory. We focus on standards. So that information will be provided to all of our schools as well. It was important that we had that conversation and make certain that we address these issues before they bubble up any larger than what they may be already. Last couple things that I'll mention, Dr. Allen, President Allen, is of course our strategic planning is moving forward. I think we have a 3-4 hour cutout even tomorrow to dive into some additional work. I know you all are anxious because in my individual conversations with you, most of you have told me, well, what is this going to look like? Or what is this going to look like? And my simple answer continues to be, it's going to be in our 5-year strategic plan. So we are working hard to ensure that we bring to you a strategic plan that addresses the priorities, and we're involving, several different individuals in this building, individuals outside of this building. Next week, I believe I'll be meeting with a group of teachers. Also, a CEO roundtable, where we're bringing several CEOs in to touch base with them to find out what is it that you desire in terms of our students. What is it that students are missing in many instances that they need in order to be successful. So we're looking forward to continuing that feedback while diving into the content of our strategic plan. With that said, Dr. Allen, that concludes my updates.
Thank you. We will now consider voting items held for discussion from the agenda review business agenda. Trustees, each month, administration will bring forth revised policies with changes recommended by the Texas Association of School Boards, or TASB. These policies will start off as action items at the agenda review meeting for the first reading. Similar to the regular board meeting, each month, all action items for agenda review, including these policies, will begin on the consent agenda. If a trustee would like an item held from the consent agenda, they should notify the District Chief of Staff, Sylvia Trent, by 8 a.m. on the Monday prior to the voting meeting. As a reminder, trustees had an opportunity prior to this meeting to submit questions before agenda review to the administration. The Q&A document has been provided to you prior to this meeting, and it is also posted on the district's website. Our first item held for discussion is agenda item K1, approval of proposed revisions to board policy AE Local Education Philosophy, first reading. This item is being held at the request of trustees Dygard, Bluford Daniels, and Cruz. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by trustee Flynn Villaseca and a second by trustee Hernandez. Is there any discussion? Let's start with trustee Dygard.
I'd actually like to hear what my colleagues have to say first, please. I'd like to hear what my colleagues have to say first, please.
Trustee Bluford Daniels?
Thank you, Madam President. And I don't have my Q&A. I'm not able to access it. My Q&A, because I think some of that stuff may have been answered. So okay, thank you. Because I did have some questions about when it's referencing TADS in Constraint 1, the DNF schools. Is that sent to me already?
Yes.
I asked how many teachers were identified as TADS. and again, effective and highly effective, those acronyms, not acronym, I'm sorry, those adjectives, I still have a problem with those. And did I get a list of the DNF schools?
Yes,
Or
ma'am.
that's coming? Okay, all right.
You did.
That was my question for K-18.
Okay.
Thank you.
Trustee Cruz?
So we're on AE local, correct?
Yes.
Pulling up the Q and A, sorry.
Got it here if you need it.
Okay, I have it. I'm just trying to get to the right page. So my question is on the constraint or the constraint progress measure for pre-K. I know it was explained in the Q and A. If you could just walk me through the process for that, please.
Sure, Dr. Madney, if you don't mind joining us at the podium to share a little insight around this particular item.
Sure, good evening. So for Constraint Progress Measure 5.1, what we did was look at the maximum number of pre-K classrooms we had had over the course of the last few years. So not current necessarily, but just the maximum for each of the campuses over the last 3 years. And then we also looked at what our capacity is now, and then increase it a little bit more, knowing that we want to see some small increments the next couple of years, and then a larger gain pending looking at what facilities look like, how we can reorganize what these programs look like. So whereas normally when we see our goals and our constraints, and you see that even line going up and having those same increases each year, what you'll see for this one is 2 years of the smaller increases and then having that larger increase in the final year. And so taking all of those data points, that we felt comfortable knowing some of the bold moves that we want to take with pre-K, that those were attainable with that new information.
Thank you, and I know that your team has been working really hard at, revisiting this, and I do appreciate the time. I am concerned that there are some data points, and I know in previous Q&As, the response was we don't have access to these data points, that we're also considering that. And then my second concern is in the last, I guess it was a workshop that we had last month, I know several of us expressed like the constraint progress measures don't get at quality because the constraint reads significantly increasing quality. So not just the number of seats, but the quality. So 5.1 nor 5.2 address that quality issue. Thank you.
I'm sorry, what I can share with you, just in the last few weeks, Dr. Cruz and Sylvia Trent, our chief of staff, we had a chance to spend some time at TUC, which of course is the Texas United Council of essentially the largest districts in the state, and this has become a focus. One of the data points in terms of some research that we were going through during that time spoke to this, and it spoke around quality and quantity. And while quality is extremely important, one of the things that we talked about during that research presentation is that quantity is extremely important as well. And what this research broke down even further is that it showed that, there was a significant impact on those students even when the quality wasn't focused on, and even better, or an even more increased impact on students when the quality was focused on. And I only share that because the number of seats is extremely important on top of the quality as well. But if there's somewhere you want to start, with the overall expansion and the number of seats, and then build on the quality over the course of time. Dr. Cruz, anything else you want to add? Chief Trent, anything you want to add in terms of what we heard during that time period?
I think you hit the nail on the head, Superintendent House.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll just add, I mean, I do appreciate that additional information. And in order to have quality, you have to have quantity, right? But I do want to make sure that we are ensuring the highest standards and that we would have a metric for that. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Trustee Santos?
Thank you, President Allen, Superintendent House. I want to take a point of privilege, though, to acknowledge a fellow trustee from Pasadena Independent School District who is here, Crystal Davila. Thank you for coming out tonight. Okay, so then my question would be, could quality seats be defined as, I know that we have a ratio that we look at, but a tenured teacher, a teacher that has 5 years of teaching experience and maybe a 11-to-1 ratio, but not a teaching assistant, a teacher in a very small classroom that has experience. Could that define quality?
In my opinion, it's not just about the number of years of experience for a teacher. I think there is definitely some hope and possibility in what happens with a teacher that has experience, but it's about the kind of feedback that teacher gets. It's about the evaluation system. It's about the systems of professional development that are in place as well. Because I've seen some 20-year vets that are rock stars, but I've also seen some 3-year vets that are rock stars as well. So that wouldn't necessarily be
Well, when I say experience, then I'm going to change my question, that instead of looking at 3 to 5 years of experience, we can look back to Trustee Bluford Daniels' point. When we determine quality or we determine effective, we can talk about cultural competency. So if the teacher talks, walks, and knows and can identify with the students in that community, if the teacher has smiles in the kid's face, if there's laughter in the classroom, if kids are learning and engaged and not just slumped down over a desk with multiple choice questions, process of elimination, like that type of experience that we talk about, because that can't be measured in a walkthrough. I mean, that's, get a kid on a bad day, he's not going to be smiling. But if that teacher, if you have a community feedback as far as culture is concerned on that campus, in that classroom, then that maybe we can define experience that way. So my question still remains, is that part of, how are we defining quality seats? Because like Trustee Bluford Daniels has said, when you talk about things that are subjective, how do you define that?
Got it. I thought you were talking about quality in terms of a teacher. I apologize.
No, I mean, how do y'all what is a quality seat?
Got it.
So for the purposes of this constraint, Constraint Progress Measure 5.2 is the quality piece. So one of the pieces that TEA says through House Bill 3 that creates a quality environment for pre-K classrooms is an instructor-to-student ratio of 11-to-1. So that progress measure was chosen specifically to get at that quality piece through the wording of the constraint.
Right, but to my understanding, that's just not necessarily teacher. That can be a TA, right?
Correct.
So
Correct.
my question is, can we take that a step further and make sure that it's experienced in however you choose to define it? And we don't have to do the bare minimum of what TEA thinks education should be, because they quite obviously haven't gotten it right yet, or all the way right? So I didn't mean to throw that slug. So I'm just, I would really like to not just do bare minimum, but go over and beyond with people that actually know pedagogy. So thank you.
Trustee Sung?
So first off, just a housekeeping thing. Could we get, I've asked before, could we get on Mondays on our calendars a reminder that we need to request to pull something from consent? Because we're still not getting that. We get them before regular board meetings, but not before agenda reviews where we're taking votes.
Thought it was on there, but we can definitely check again. Did you all Other board members get it?
Okay. I didn't. I'm glad some of my colleagues did. It seems like we're mixed. Some of us did, some of us didn't. Okay. On the topic of quality early childhood education seats, I fully agree that 5.2 is a quality indicator. I think it's important to acknowledge that because all of the standards kind of nationwide that look at quality of early childhood education always mention the teacher to student ratio. So if we had to pick one metric, I think we've got the one that's most important for quality. I agree that there's others, and I want to emphasize we don't have to reinvent this at this table. Like there is a lot of research out there about what our quality early childhood education. There's research, there's accreditation organizations, and I would be way out of line if I claimed to be the expert even at this table on that topic. But I just want to point out that that expertise is out there, and I think our administration has appropriately picked one of them. If they wanted to pick another, I wouldn't be opposed to that. But just to say that we don't have to figure that, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So thank you. I'm excited about the more ambitious goal here. I'm excited about having a nonlinear target graph. I think that makes a lot of sense. So I'm looking forward to see how that develops. Turning to constraint progress measure 1.2, could you tell us more about how you developed this revised target, please?
Sure. So this one, in listening to feedback, and some of the feedback was about, are we okay saying that the target is still below the average? And so just incorporating that, having more internal conversations, looking at the big rocks that we can still move. In fact, we had some conversation today about this internally, about how some of the work aligns with this constraint as well as 1.1. And so we looked at, we originally had said we will increase 3 percentage points. We thought that doubling that is doable. It still lands us just shy of the average. So landing at 55, our average is 58 for all students. So it's still just shy, but for knowing that it's the next 3 years, we see this as something to continue to ensure that this population of students is actually at or above average in the coming 5 to 7 years even.
Okay. Well, I'm delighted to hear that we have a new target that's, it sounds like we believe it's achievable, but the conversations that are around it are driving some strategic thought, and that it's ambitious, which is the sweet spot we want to be in. Okay. Thank you. So thank you very much. I know that you guys have put some additional work into this, and you've had to bring different people together to the table to develop these goals, but I'm appreciative of the work, and I'm excited for where it leads us. Thank you.
Trustee Dygard?
Thank you. So on constraint 1 progress measures, and I keep going back to, what are we trying to accomplish with the constraint, right? And we, again, I can't reemphasize enough, the board owns the constraints, the administration owns the progress measures. So constraint 1, students needing the most support, and it's 1.1, 1.2 are clear to me. I'm still struggling a little, and I know this isn't what's being changed, but with 1.3 over the fact that we have such our average teacher ratings are 90% are effective or highly effective. At our lowest performing campuses at 70%. And does 1.3 address that concern?
Not directly. This is really about retaining teachers at those campuses so that there's not that constant churn.
Okay.
So for 1.3, we're not
That's all I
looking at
need
the
to hear.
indicators.
Okay. So then constraint 5, and I'm actually have pulled up just as an example, the subjective high quality. There are evidence-based practices of which we've already discussed one. Another evidence-based practice is all lead teachers have at least a BA degree plus suitable credentials in early learning and are paid the same level as K-12 teachers. There are standards that are evidence-based for the term high quality. But I hear you, Mr. House, on prioritizing getting our kiddos into classrooms while we're increasing quality. I'm still struggling, however, with progress measure 5.1, and I get that you all have figured, discussed how you can increase that number. But I'm concerned that there's still it's still about filling existing seats as opposed to also making sure that in spaces where we have demand and need and there aren't the seats. And what I would like to propose is that the board reconsiders the language of Constraint 5, that the superintendent will not allow 3 and 4-year-olds within HISD boundaries to be without high-quality, full-day early learning opportunities within a 2-mile radius of their residence. And I should have presented that as a motion.
And I was like, second.
So I move that what I just said,
You just
that we
just
change our language.
Requested, because it's still
Okay.
agenda review.
That I just I'd like for the board to discuss it before we just change it. So, but second round, we can talk more, but it's an equity issue to me.
Second.
Trustee Hernandez?
That was me, right? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Matney, for the updates, and I'll get back to what you were saying right now. I know that you did mention that we have the number for what our capacity is now for these seats. Do you have that number?
Not right now.
Okay. I've been waiting on that number.
I thought we've submitted it, but I'll double check.
Okay,
and make
okay.
sure.
But I did appreciate that, that you did some research, and I see that the number has grown. Just one housekeeping item. I know that we do it for the other changes in here. We could just like scratch it out and leave the old numbers there just so that it's easier to compare. That would be wonderful.
So 5.1 is actually a brand new one because y'all removed it completely last time instead of leaving it to edit. So that's why the formatting looks like that. Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Okay. I appreciate 1.2 changing to 6%, 6% as well. I know that you've done a lot of research on that, so thank you. For Sue's almost motion, I think that making sure that we have seats in the right areas of where the needs are is very important. I hadn't thought about that language before, but I think it's something that we should consider. And I would, if somebody could type it up and put it on the screen just so that we can see it. I don't know if you have it, Sue, but I would love to see it so we can discuss it further. Thank you.
Trustee Blueford Daniels?
Thank you, Madam President. Superintendent House, okay, I know we got a new system, and so we're trying to transfer, but I'm gonna have to use my notes so I can be, I try to send all my questions and answers in early, and I'm still not coordinated enough to know what the answers are, so I'll have to get some help on that. So send your best and brightest. I'll use it, you can use that adjective and send them to me, to help me. But anyway, let me ask, seriously, my time is running. On K1, when we talked about the mandate for change, I don't want us to continue to kick the can down the road. And one of the questions that I was asking about the magnet programs, and the magnet programs is, let me see, pause so I can reclaim my time. The magnet program, what constraint is that? I had several. Let's just start with the mandate for change, package page 11. And how will the reward, where it says employees should be rewarded, employees identified as high performers using value-added data should be rewarded. My question is, how will the reward allow employees who are part of a low-performing school an opportunity or be identified as high performers? I know that's in my Q&A.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Madney?
What is that process? I mean, I'm concerned with those that are low-performing schools. Those that are high performers will continuously probably get the reward, I would think. And those that are low-performing schools will not have the opportunity to be rewarded. So that's my concern for that balance. This is K1B, mandate for change.
K1B.
2 of 12 are
Package page 11 in my old book.
Chief Trin?
I've been passed the baton. So for this particular section of the policy, as you notice, is not grayed out, so we are not at this time recommending any changes. This language is outdated. We do not have that value-added data to incentivize or to reward our teachers, our employees any longer.
Okay.
So our administration's focus for this particular policy were the goals, the constraints, and the progress measures that we are bringing to you. This policy is quite lengthy and hefty. There has been conversation by the board to go back and modify some of those other pieces.
Like just now.
Yes. But I do want to caution that our administration's focus for this meeting, for this particular policy that we're bringing to you tonight, and that we'll bring again for Thursday with edits and modifications as recommended, is the focus is on the goals, constraints, and progress measures. And I think now we're just down to the progress measures at this point. Because we got the goals, we almost have the constraints, and so what we're bringing to you is the progress measures. But that's noted that one trustee is asking us to look at some other pieces, but I do want to say that those pieces require additional conversation by the trustees.
And I appreciate that. I know we're looking at the progress measures, but as I sent the Q&As, the questions for what we were supposed to review, my concern became, I'm concerned with the verbiage that was used here and the fact that it appears that we're just kicking the can down the road. For instance, school choice, that was part of what we had for the agenda review. So my notes on that says, what are we doing for school choices for those schools that don't have magnet programs or anything? Since I can't coordinate with what's on the computer and I don't have my new laptop, I'm going according to my notes that I wrote in the binder that was sent to me. So if I'm on the wrong page, then y'all tell me, because I'll come back and reclaim my time.
So what I will say, Trustee Bluford Daniels, even though we're dealing with some dated language here, these are portions of what we're moving forward with to address in our strategic work. So, yes, it's the board's job to develop this side of the language and the constraints. But please know that it's something that we're focusing our work on regardless.
And I appreciate that. I just don't want us to get caught up in a whole lot of verbiage and reconstructing this, that, and the other. And the reality of it is we still have issues with identifying school choice, identifying magnet programs. And so I want some real meat, not fat, on what we're going to do to try and get those schools that don't have that with those programs, period. And how soon can we do that? Bottom line.
I know Superintendent House has addressed this, so I'll address it for him again. That particular concern is going to be addressed. It's already addressed via one of our priorities. And now the next thing that we're going to be doing with those priorities is fleshing it out. What are those programs and systems and supports and resources that all schools need to have? So that's where that school choice magnet will come into play, but we're working on that as we speak. Tomorrow is actually a full-day retreat where we are fleshing out that 5-year strategic plan.
Okay, and I'll have to deal with that, because I'm coming right back next Thursday, and I'm asking these same questions about some of these schools, because so many of them don't have the programs.
Right, but we,
I am. They'll get the programs in my school and I'll stop asking.
You through? Trustee Song?
I know. But 22, 23 is not addressed.
Thank you, Madam
It doesn't do
President.
the same thing as 22 and 23.
So my question would be directed at Trustee Dygard. So thank you very much for giving some thought to the constraint and bringing this language and highlighting the importance of students accessing early learning opportunities near their residence. You know, the research indicates that proximity is a huge factor for parents and where they place their youngest children. So my question to you, Trustee Dygard, is, do these need, it's probing what your intent is with the word opportunities. Do these need to be HISD opportunities? Do they need to be free opportunities? If they're high quality, full day early learning opportunities that other people provide, then we're off the hook. Like, kind of unpack that a little for me.
If I answer her question, does that count against my time?
It's
Okay.
not counted under my time. But then be brief.
Don't count it against her time. So, we don't have the capacity in some communities, such as Gulfton. I mean, you and I have had this conversation, parents that line up for the few seats that might be available in a school, right? And we can't wait to have a bond with new structures or expanding capacity of existing buildings for kids. I mean, it's too long. They're only 4 for 1 year. They're only 3 and 4 for 2 years. They can't wait another 2 or 3 years to have this space. And I think other cities have done this where they have partnered with existing programs, but they're under the umbrella of the school district, so that they, can make sure that they are high quality, that they have standards. They're on our rules for ADA, all of that stuff, and it doesn't delay getting the kiddos into our district and under our umbrella. And we lose a lot of our little ones to charter schools and other systems because there isn't capacity in their community for the families to send them to a quality pre-K program. And I think there are 2 problems here. One is capacity in some communities, and then there are other communities where capacity exists. And, we need to make sure that we're getting those littles into those classrooms. And I feel like this more...
So I heard in your vision, they count towards ADA, so these are HISD opportunities. We can't just say, hey, somebody else has a, 1 spot open. And then the other thing that troubles me about this is, if we can point to a full day early learning opportunity in a school, but if families aren't signing up for it, then we can still check a community off our list with this language. I'm just trying to make sure that this language holds us accountable for getting kids into classrooms. So I'm just thinking through what this would do.
if you don't mind, I'd love
Yes,
to
sure.
interject
Superintendent
here.
House.
And Sue, I think it's definitely well intended. I love the idea. It aligns with the research as well in terms of what we know about kids that live. If they live more than 2 miles, they typically don't want to go to a particular program. But one of the things that I have to caution us of is that, and I think you mentioned, outfitting facilities from an early childhood standpoint to meet specific standards. What I want to make sure that we understand is that by putting this in play, it puts us in a position where we're required in a very short period of time to accomplish something that would be very, very difficult. I think over the course of time, we can increase and work towards this 2-mile radius goal. But to put this in place in a short period of time and have that expectation is very, very difficult, to make sure that the toilets, to make sure that the exits, to make sure that all of those pieces are in place within 2 miles of all of the kids in our population is a very, very difficult task operationally.
Okay, and then Trustee
And I
Duggar.
hear where you're coming from in terms of partnerships, definitely, but it still boils down to, you can partner, but you still have to have a facility. That's the key.
Okay, and then I'm coming back to you, Superintendent House, but I have one more question for Trustee Duggar. Do these need to be free opportunities or affordable opportunities? Would you be open to that language?
I am totally open to other language.
Okay.
And that's why I did not want to make a motion until everybody had an opportunity to weigh in on the idea.
Okay, thank you. And then turning back to the proposed constraint progress measure language, 5.1. Superintendent House, it seems to me if we're increasing enrollment from 11,663 to 24,837, which is a considerable jump in 3 years, we're going to have to consider location. We're going to have to open some new
And you're right.
locations that
Over
would
the course
consider
of 3 years.
that would consider driving distance. So I suspect even with the existing language, we would get to some of Trustee Duggar's concerns.
And I agree, but I think it's over the course of incremental time to get there. What I was hearing is that, something like that might need to happen immediately. So I just think we need to make certain that in the language, it's very clear that incrementally, we want to see the kind of growth towards a particular goal that meets this 2-mile radius that we're talking about here.
Okay, thank you. My time is up. I did hear that.
Okay, I have a question for Trustee Duggar, and it's kind of like what Superintendent House was saying. I know that in the neighborhood schools, some of the pre-K is not offered at every school, and it's not offered at every school because of the fire and safety requirements that you have to have 2 doors in every classroom for the students in pre-K, kindergarten, to get in and out of. So, and I know that this would put them in, because I was in this same predicament myself where I had some kindergartners in a classroom and they didn't have 2 doors, and I got written up by the fire marshals. But so you have to have a door that on one side. That's why you always say have that little door that when the new buildings and they go through the bathroom, you have to be able to get out of every classroom in 2 different ways. And you have to have so many square feet per classrooms. So not all of the schools within a 2-mile radius would qualify for having, and then I know 2 miles, some schools don't even have a building within a 2-mile radius. And I also was concerned about, I know we have the students there, but for pre-K, won't they still have to meet the qualifications even though the students are there to?
That's correct.
Yeah, you have to meet certain qualifications to even qualify to be in the program for pre-K. Everybody just can't go to pre-K, or else you'd have to pay for it. So those were just my concerns of the things that I knew that I would have been concerned about is every classroom having to have, in the older buildings, you may not have enough for your kindergartners to have 2 doors and add some pre-Ks and have 2 doors in the classroom. That and the qualifications issue where even though if we put the classrooms there, we may not have the kids because they don't qualify with low income and military. You have to have those. I think there's 13 ways that you have to qualify. That's all I have to say. Go ahead.
Can I answer your questions?
Yes.
So I hear your concern about facilities, and I get that the way we write constraints is not the same as the way we write goals of from X to Y by Z, right? But there is an implication of that if you look at any of our progress measures are not, next year we're going to be at 100% of where we want to be, right? The progress measures are written X to Y by Z. So it's still a process, and it doesn't, and I fully recognize that however this constraint is written, it doesn't mean that every 3-year-old and 4-year-old is in a pre-K class next year. Just like the way the other constraints are written doesn't mean that every special ed child has the quality of teacher that we feel that they need and deserve next year. It is a process because you have to build capacity, right? But they should also challenge the organization and not just say, well, this is all we can do. It should be, no, this is what we feel we should do. And then it's up to the superintendent to figure out how to do it. And that's why the progress measures then would be, here's where we're at. Here's where we feel we can challenge the organization, but is still attainable within that progress measure, right? Based on our resources of buildings, of dollars, of teachers, so on and, for quality, so on and so forth. I'm open to language changes. As Trustee Sung brought up about, is it free or is it affordable? It's not up to us to decide the mechanics of how this is achieved. It's up to us to say, no, this is what needs to be achieved, and it's the superintendent's job then to decide how, right? But I am open to revisions to the language if this is something that y'all want to consider.
Trustee Cruz?
Thank you, President Allen. You guys know that I love to quote the HERC studies that was done in 2019. A significant number of students do not have access to HISD pre-K within their zone or within a mile of where they live. Students who are EL have less than or equal access to pre-K programs as their non-EL peers. This is from the TEA website. It says, before seeking a waiver to meet the full-day pre-K requirement, or before constructing, repurposing, or leasing a classroom facility or issuing bonds to meet the full-day pre-K requirement, HB3 requires districts to solicit or consider a public-private partnership with high-quality childcare or Head Start programs. So my question is, I'm curious, and President Allen, if I may address Trustee Dygard. So the word opportunities, why that word as opposed to just full-day pre-K? Why early learning opportunities?
I'm not wedded to that language. You could change it.
Okay,
It's
I'm just
fine.
curious,
Yeah.
like, it feels very, very broad. It could be interpreted different ways. But I do want to second what you said earlier, Trustee Dygard, in terms of like, this would not be tomorrow that we would achieve this. But I think it is critical, and we've, us around the table have, I think we are concerned and we know that how critical these years are in terms of the trajectory of students. And, referencing HERC again, they gave us a heat map of where those gaps are. Majority of them are in District 2. There definitely are other areas of the city that lack even the opportunity for pre-K, and this is our chance to address it. Thank you.
Trustee Guidry?
Thank you, President Allen. Okay, so I, obviously, this is a great constraint to consider, but I have a couple of questions, and my question goes to Mr. House. Let me just ask you, sir, because we have to write constraints that are attainable. Is the limit of the 2-mile radius even feasible, particularly with some of our rural communities?
Not currently. Looking at this restraint, the way it reads, unless there was some kind of modification, it reads that this needs to happen now. So this is not something that could be done in a year. I think this is something that would have to be tied towards partnerships, towards bond, towards a multitude of different strategies to approach it. It's definitely something that we can work towards, but it's not something that will happen fast. From an infrastructure standpoint, very difficult. As a former principal that had 4 Head Start classrooms in my building, where we outfitted gymnasiums with classrooms, dropped ceilings, put floors in, to make classrooms out of, utilizing gymnasiums. Those partnerships were there because we were working towards this at the time in my district. So it's something that took time and planning. Definitely something that we plan to focus on, but I just want to emphasize what you all have talked about as well. It's not something that's feasible in a short period of time, in a year.
So is it something that we could maybe reconsider? Or if we're writing it, can we write it such that it does not, we don't look at it and consider it like right away?
That's a question for me?
Yes, please.
So, yes, but if you look at constraint 1, why are we not interpreting constraint 1 through that same lens when we're saying we're just going to go from 57% to 60% on something over a 5-year period of time, right? We haven't set out with, this is something that has to happen tomorrow, right? We have set out with the idea of we want to challenge the organization on something that should be over time attainable, that we value this, and this is where we're going to challenge the administration, and we're going to challenge ourselves with the decisions we'll have to make as a board that the administration will bring to us to make this happen, because we think that this is a priority, that we will not operate without having any of these constraints, because we think they're that valuable for our children.
And I want to make it clear to all trustees that this is a priority. It's not something that we are focusing on. As a matter of fact, Ruth Turley, the lead with HERC, will be with us tomorrow in our retreat. So this is something that we are focusing on. But again, it's something that will definitely take some time, infrastructure, finances to get there, but it's a focus.
Trustee Santos?
Thank you, President Allen, Superintendent House, and I'd like to go on the record that this is one of the first times that I feel excited and hopeful, and that we are all coming to a sort of consensus that where our values lie. But I am going to say that I'm a little leery of the unintended consequences that this specific language can cause. However, just the way that Trustee Cruz said it, this is where we're headed, universal pre-K. That's something that we can address a lot of social issues that can actually change some of the institutional racism that has come in with public education that has not been addressed yet. So I would like to take a look at the LBB a second time. The facilities assessment that we paid $5 million for, the compensation study that we still have not received, the enrollment study that we still haven't received on top of the HERC study. And I have a question, I guess, Superintendent House. The fire exit pre-existing, so my understanding is that if a building predates the new fire code requirements, it's still allowed, right?
We can get that exact information. I know there is language that speaks to something similar to where you're coming from, but I don't want to speak out of turn because I don't know the exact language and what it does or does not say, but we can provide that.
Right, and so there is nothing that says that we cannot fit the cost for pre-K, and it's an investment. We can cover the cost for every single student that's zoned to HISD to have access to pre-K. We don't have to do the bare minimum of what TEA, the same agency that has messed we don't have to do the bare minimum. We can go over and beyond, and again, the reason why we are where we are, public education, is because we do the bare minimum. Additionally, I am not opposed to learning centers, partnering with Harris County Department of Education. Again, before we talk about, we've talked, from this day has talked about closing schools in poor communities. We've talked about bringing charter enrollment up, but this is a solution to all of that. This is a solution to a lot of issues that we have going on, especially now after COVID. Like, we're seeing the effects in our communities of how our students yearn to be in a classroom. But before we talk about partnerships, I do want to talk about building capacity and starting to build our budget around our human capital. So I'm going to be quiet now, but thank you.
Trustee Hernandez?
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Cruz, for bringing up that HERC study. Dr. Matney, would you happen to know the number of students that are not able to enroll in HISD pre-KK because we don't have the seats?
I do not have that with me this evening.
Okay. I would like to say that 3- and 4-year-olds are our future. If we need to prioritize them right now. If we wait, I know that this amendment or constraint sounds. I know that was not 2 minutes. That was not 2 minutes? Okay. 3- and 4-year-olds are our future, and if we wait to wait a year to put something like this in place, that just means that there's a whole nother set of students that is waiting for these classrooms. So the faster that we do this, that we're able to put this in place, I understand that it's not going to be next year, right? We all understand that. But the faster that we put this in place into our policy, into our constraints, I think that the faster that we can get there in actually making sure that we have those seats available, at least seats available for students that need it. And I'm all about prioritizing our early childhood, even if that means that we have to pay for the full day of pre-K.
Trustee Nygaard?
Thank you. So I've got a comment and then I've got another question for the administration. So I know in response, Trustee Sung asked a question about partnerships for capacity, and I know that makes everybody squirm, but I want to make sure folks also understand how pre-K makes affordable childcare in our city possible for many families. And every 3- and 4-year-old is in an HISD facility. A lot of our affordable communities, affordable childcare options are no longer financially viable. And so there is an ecosystem that we are part of here that I don't think should be discounted in this conversation. It's a bigger problem that we're part of, right? And I want to make sure that we're thoughtful of that in this as well. My question is, back to the actual progress measure as it's being presented mindful of the concerns that I've raised, that to me really comes down to an equity of access problem or concern. Constraint progress measure 5.1, how do we make sure, especially since there's not really an equity component in the way the constraint is written, like there would be the way I've proposed it, hence why I prefer that language or that direction of language. How can I know as a trustee in 5.1 that, where the HERC study has pointed out these shortages are, if there isn't capacity, how will I know as a trustee when I'm monitoring progress that these seats are being provided equitably and not just where they're easy to put, but where they're most needed? It's a question. It's a very long question.
I think when we talk about progress monitoring, it's something that has to happen over time. We have to measure ourselves with the number of seats that we've increased by in particular areas of town. And that's a part of what we're looking to focus on. It's a part of why HERC is with us tomorrow. It's a part of, the goal moving forward. So we're completely in agreement that this is definitely something that has not been in play the way it needs to be in play. And it's definitely something that, we're focusing our efforts on. I think it's up to this board to determine what that looks like, but I think we've heard, what those concerns are. But regardless of what the concerns are, we're going to be working towards it. So, determining, how we measure that growth over the course of time is something that we'll be, taking a close look at as well.
So HERC, right? You're meeting with them tomorrow. We own the constraint, but would you be amenable to having this conversation with them tomorrow about these progress measures and about our constraint?
Sure.
Of like, do they believe that this is going to drive the change that our students need from our district?
Yep, we can definitely bring it to the table. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Then I move we postpone the vote on this item until next week so that we can get some feedback from you on it.
Second, Guidry.
Thank you.
So I just want to clarify, Trustee Dygard, you want to postpone first reading, so next week would be first reading?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. So I move that we postpone first reading of K1 to our December regular board meeting on December 9th, so that Mr. House has an opportunity to have a deeper conversation about it with HERC. Thank you.
Second, Guidry.
We have a motion by trustee Dygard and a second by trustee Guidry. Is there any discussion? Trustee Blueford Daniel?
We created these progress measures.
Oh, it's on, sorry.
Okay. We created these progress measures, correct? We created this. We're just updating all of this as we prepared, and we just we're making revisions to what we had already created. Am I not correct?
We haven't approved it.
I'm sorry?
We did not make the progress measures.
I didn't hear you.
She said we did not make the progress.
Okay, so this first reading is the changes that were suggested to us through, who suggested these changes to us?
Administration.
Okay, I'm going somewhere with this. So this first reading, I think it's already been motioned for us to postpone it. And I think it's important to do so because it looks like, that we're identifying some fallout of some concerns that we have that we didn't identify before. And it looks like, too, that it would probably be necessary, a good way from the dialogue that's been going back and forth would be for us to discuss it in detail at a board retreat so that we all can have some back and forth and conversation about it. Because I think there's been a lot of questioning and answering about third graders, pre-Ks, I'm sorry. And let me just say, because I realized in District 2 it was going to be an issue with pre-K, then I went to Mr. House and I asked about a program continuing in District 2 at Cashmere Elementary. And for that, I appreciate it because I expressed the importance of having that program, that pre-K program at Cashmere L and the 3-year program, I think is what it was, wasn't it, at Cashmere L? Because again, the area does not have facilities that are where people can afford to send their kids to a daycare, and they need to be in a learning environment. And for that, I want to just publicly say thank you, Mr. House, for doing that. But I think that that we need to have a lot more discussion so that we all can be engaged in a board retreat.
Thank
That
you.
was a statement.
Trustee Cruz, did you have a question about the postponement discussion?
No, thank you.
Trustee Sung, did you have discussions about the postponement?
Thank you. I have my Robert's Rules of Orders training notes, and it says that discussion on the motion to postpone can go to the, oh, it can't only be to the merits of postponing. Okay, I do have a comment on this. So, I actually have a substantive comment on this that I would like to make, and so I'd like to be able to do that before we postpone this. I'll just say that. May I? Okay, thank you. So I think what we've discussed is this general impression among trustees, and maybe it's true, okay, that the proposed revised language for the constraint is a more ambitious goal. And maybe it is from a facility standpoint to get this done in 5 years. But what I'm concerned about is the gap between having a facility and having students in classrooms. And to me, that's what matters, is I want every 3 or 4-year-old engaged in a high-quality learning experience, whether it's in an HISD classroom or somewhere else. So it's an open question to me. Like, our existing constraint, or as proposed, with its progress measure, could be more ambitious, actually, because it requires, progress measure 5.1, students actually enrolled in classrooms, whereas you could envision a scenario where there's a nice learning opportunity, but kids aren't enrolling. I mean, we know that everybody has the opportunity to vote at a polling location near you, but not so many people go out to vote, right? So I'm worried about, I don't know which one is more ambitious. So I'm just saying that, and so if you're gonna talk with the data experts running the Kinder Institute, that would be the question I'd like to get from them, is which way is more ambitious? I don't know. Thank you.
Seeing no other, oh, okay.
So I just want to clarify, because it seems to be there's a little bit a concern I'm hearing about why would we change the constraint? We've already decided on it. We own the constraint, administration owns the progress measure, but if there is a lack of consensus or lingering concerns over a progress measure, it usually indicates that there needs to be some refinement done to the actual constraint. And that's all I'm suggesting that we consider, is if the progress measures aren't getting at the true intent of what we thought we meant when we made the constraint, maybe we need to refine the language a little bit. It's all I'm suggesting with this. I am totally open to different language. This is something that I just typed together super fast. Totally open, and I totally hear your point, Trustee Sung. If we don't just want to have the seats, we want to have children in them. And so,
Okay.
What I would like to do, the motion stands on the table. Let's get more information from Mr. House, from HERC, and revisit it next week. And if we still feel like we're not ready to vote on this, then we consider having a deeper dive conversation in a workshop.
Trustee Hernandez? Seeing no other names in the queue, please vote on the postponement. Voting on the postponement. We have 7 for, 1 against. The K1 will be postponed. Our next item held for discussion is agenda item K8, approval of proposed revisions to board policy EI local academic achievement, first reading. This item is being held at the request of Trustee Cruz. May I have a motion?
So moved, Trustee Cruz.
Second.
Hernandez.
We have a motion by Trustee Cruz and a second by Trustee Hernandez. Is there any discussion? Trustee Cruz?
Thank you, President Allen. So I just wanted clarity. I had submitted the question. So currently, if a student fails 1 semester of a 2-semester course, they have to retake the entire semester. And with this, it would not require them to retake the entire semester. Am I understanding that correctly?
Dr. Madney?
That is correct.
So what is the alternative?
So first of all, not all courses are 2 semesters.
Okay.
So if you consider a 1-semester course, having to repeat the second part of is not always applicable. Other options include taking credit by exam. So students who have not been successful on a course or part of a course can go and take that for credit recovery. They can take that exam. They can also take APEX, so they can be enrolled in an online version and be targeted with what they are having to remediate, and then take an assessment at the end. So it's not necessarily an entire semester.
And will there be some sort of standardization of what that looks like in the district?
Yes, so there are only certain ways that students can earn credit. So
Okay.
you can't just have a teacher go and ask a few questions and then assign credit in the system. It has to be through APEX, through credit by exam, or through one of our face-to-face courses, or of course online with Texas Connections.
Okay. And that doesn't need to be specified in this policy?
No, that's already the case.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Seeing no other questions, please vote. K8. We have 8 for, 0 against. Our next item held for discussion is agenda item K9, approval of proposed revisions to board policy FNG local, student rights and responsibilities, student and parent complaints, grievances, first reading. This item is being held at the request of trustee Bluford Daniels. May I have a motion?
So moved. Edmonds.
Is there a second?
Second, Guidry.
We have a motion by trustee Hernandez and a second by trustee Guidry. Is there any discussion? Trustee Bluford Daniels.
Thank you, Madam President. My questions are real brief, because in the general provisions, it talks about the complaint forms and appeal notices, page 52. Should be filed and hand delivery by electronic communication, including email and fax. And my question was, hand delivered where?
Dr. Cruz?
Sure. So I'd like to ask Mr. August Hamilton to address this, but my understanding is that it can be, the complaint can be issued to the school or to central office.
I want this policy to be clear so that those reading it will know where the hand delivery should be if they have any concerns with the student's rights and responsibilities.
That's noted, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And the other part of that was, it says under scheduling conferences, the district shall make reasonable attempts to schedule conferences at mutually agreeable time. Is there a way to define that more, like 10 days, 15 days, to have something more matter of fact as opposed to it being subjective as to what reasonable is?
I would defer to our legal counsel, Ms. Hutchins-Taylor, because I think we need to be very careful about what that looks like. So I would definitely defer to her in reference to where that.
Point me again to the section that you're referencing, I'm sorry. Page 3.
Page,
3 of 8?
under K9, is it
This one. Yes. Yes,
Page
I'm
3 of
looking for
8.
I'm looking for the section.
package page 52, under the general provisions for filing a complaint?
Okay.
And then, I'm sorry, come down to scheduling conferences.
Right.
And I was just asking about the verbiage reasonable and mutually agreeable time. I don't want it to fall through the cracks that the mutual agreeable time between someone lodging a complaint is not conducive to someone who they're complaining to, the person receiving it, as well as the word reasonable. I just wanted to see if we can get that more defined.
As in the number of attempts that the administration will make to contact the parent around scheduling? I think that this language is aimed at sometimes we receive the complaint and then in trying to communicate and reach a mutual time, we don't get feedback. And so it's intended to say that we'll make reasonable attempts, but if you want to define that we'll document at least 3 attempts to reach out to the parent, is that?
And that's what I'm looking for, because I don't want that to be, again, subjective well, I tried to call you last night, and I didn't call you anymore, and there's nothing to validate that attempt.
Okay.
And on page 5 of 8, the complaint and appeal form. After the level 1 conference, no new documents may be submitted by the student or parent unless the student or parent did not know the documents existed before the level 1 conference. I needed some clarity on that, and we could just not discuss that necessarily here, but I would like to have some further discussion about that, because again, I'm just concerned with opportunities for parents to meet with the administrations at various schools, or in any case, whatever the case may be. I don't want us to limit ourselves and have the opportunity for parents not to be able to exercise every right to contact administration about any concerns they may have.
So what I hear that is that you would feel more comfortable with a, within X number of days.
Correct, I would.
Okay.
I think it should be defined as such, like 3 to 10 days or 3 to 5 days or something that's reasonable, because we have parents that are working. Obviously, we always concern ourselves with that. And if we say, maybe they can't get off this week and can't get off until the following week, so I'd be concerned that if we had 10 or 15 days, then maybe they could make some allowances in that time to have to deal with any constraints or concerns that they have at the schools. I'm not going to ask if it makes sense, because you want to tell me no. Thank you. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions in the queue, please vote. Eight for, 0 against. Our last item held for discussion is Agenda Item K-12, approval of proposed revisions to Board Policy GRA relations with governmental entities, state and local governmental authorities, first reading. This item is also being held at the request of Trustee Bluford Daniels. May I have a motion?
So,
Hernandez.
Is there a second?
second, Cruz.
We have a motion by Trustee Hernandez and a second by Trustee Cruz. Discussion? Trustee Bluford Daniels.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. I am not going to say I have a lot of read by proxy, but I try to nitpick little things that can catch us in a trick bag. And so on package page 73, 1 of 2, under other questionings of students, I had a concern with that, because it says the principal ordinarily should make reasonable efforts to notify the student's parents or any other persons having lawful control of the student. And my question was, how is this going to be documented, that the principal made that reasonable effort to notify the student's parents? And the other part of that question is, do the principals have HISD phones, cell phones issued? And if that could be a mechanism to show that with a phone call made on this date or another date, we made an attempt to contact the student's parents.
Dr. Cruz?
Sure, so we can, it's not specifically laid out here, of course, but we can certainly, what we can do is revisit that with our principals to make sure that there's clarity around what documentation should exist, and that may take different forms. It may be a combination of phone records, it may be a log, it may be email communication, et cetera. But I believe that there is a need for us perhaps to go back and just kind of revisit that with our principals, and we'll work with Chief Watts to make sure that principals are clear that there's an expectation for them to have some documentation.
And I appreciate that. I don't want it to fall through a loophole that we didn't have a way of validating that we reached out, especially with law enforcement concern or CPS, that there's an immediate situation going on, and we say we reached out to the student's parents, and we don't have anything to validate that we called that parent. Or, we could send an email, but who said the parent is receiving emails? So it just seems to be, it needs to be another layer of support to validate that we made an attempt.
Of course, it looks different for every parent. Some parents only want to be contacted by text. Some, so it's almost, and I hate to go back to this language, it's also almost making that reasonable attempt versus, putting specific language around, telephone, email, text, but that reasonable attempt. But we can definitely go back and take a look at it.
And I appreciate that. That just stood out at me, just something to think about. So thank you.
Trustee Sung?
Could you clarify what is meant by a school official in this policy?
That would be administration at a school.
Okay, thank you. That was my only question.
Seeing no other questions in the queue, please vote. We have 8 for and 0 against. We're now ready to approve the balance of the agenda review business agenda items by consensus. May I have a motion?
So moved, Hernandez.
We have a motion by trustee Hernandez and a second by trustee Bluford Daniels. Is there any discussion? Please vote. We have 8 for, 0 against. At this time, we will take a recess for 15 minutes, 14 minutes. 7:31. We'll be back at 7:45.
Procedure.
Our next order of business is to consider items to be presented at the regular board meeting on December 9th, 2021. As a reminder, trustees, everyone had an opportunity prior to this meeting to submit questions to the administration. The Q&A document was sent to all trustees and has been posted on the district website. We have two items which trustee Blueford Daniels has already requested to pull for discussion this evening, Agenda B1 and Agenda F1. Beginning with District 1, please state any other items you would like to have pulled. Trustee Santos. Trustee Blueford Daniels? You still want B1 and F1? Okay. Trustee Hernandez?
No additional.
Trustee Nygaard? Trustee Sung?
None, thank you.
Trustee Cruz?
I4.
Trustee Guidry?
I just have F1 as well. Thank you.
Trustee Blueford Daniels? You still want B1? Okay. And you still want F1? You have any additionals?
No, ma'am.
Okay, let's get started.
B1, package page 17 of B1. I just had a question about the finance operations of Wisdom, Hines Caldwell, and Booker T. Washington. I know it was stated before that there is audit performed once they're requested. Were these audits requested?
So can I actually address that since I'm the one that wrote this report? Is that okay?
Yes.
Thank you, President Allen. So the purpose of this report is basically to report on everything that the audit committee did over the course of the year. So in terms of those audits, that's the plan that the internal audit department brings forward and we approved in June. Some of them I think were specific requests, but those were largely by the, it's based on the risk assessment, those interviews that we've been participating in right now. And that's obviously the ones we're doing now are for the next audit year. But these prior audits are based on the risk assessment, on trustee recommendations, et cetera.
Okay, so my question still is, were these audits requested? And if so, by whom?
Oh, yeah, Garwin can have.
Good evening. Those audits are from the audit plan, and none of them were requested audits.
They were from the what, I'm sorry?
They're from the audit plan that was approved by the board.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you repeat it? Because I didn't hear most of it.
They're from the audit plan that was approved by the board.
So those particular schools were ID'd, Wisdom, Hines, and Booker T. Washington,
Yes.
by the board?
The board approved.
By the board?
The board approved doing 3 activity fund audits. And so those 3 schools were chosen by internal audit.
So they weren't requested, then they were chosen?
Well, I'd have to check all 3. We may have had 1 or 2 of them that were requested by the principals. But
And
the
I asked the question because I know in the past when I ask about doing audits at schools, that you said that ordinarily they request them. And I'd ask about having them done like quarterly. And I'm glad to see that you're doing, don't get me wrong. But I just wanted to know, based on what you said before about them being done as requested, That's why I want to know if they were requested.
So we had 3 that were done. I believe 2 of the 3 were requested. But I can double check it and get back to you.
Okay, let me know next week, please.
Okay.
And the other thing I want to say is, I'm glad to see that your audit manual has been updated on the HISD website. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. So did the audit committee approve that audit manual, or you just updated it?
I just updated it.
Okay, I'd just like to make a point that, make a motion that the board review, once we have our board retreat, review that audit plan so we can identify potentially where we can improve the opportunity. Because I'm always concerned with, as I went through this, paying an outside audit company. That's a big issue with me, with things that we could be doing internally. So I just want to make that part of my comments. So that's all I had, Madam President.
Our next item on the agenda for discussion is F1. Oh, we had.
I had a follow-up question to that. Trustee Cruz, you're chair of audit, right? So when is the next, every year the board has an opportunity to make recommendations for the next year's audit plan that then the board votes on. When is that coming up next, please?
So we, we approved it this last year in June, so
Okay.
I suspect it'll be in June of this coming year as well.
Okay.
So I would say prior to that, giving those recommendations.
I just couldn't remember. Thank you for refreshing my memory. Thank you.
Trustee Santos?
I guess it's a procedural question, Dr. Allen. I did not, is K6 pulled?
Did what?
K6?
That was in this agenda.
That was an agenda review.
Oh, dang. Okay, all right, thank you.
Our next item on the agenda is F1, authority to negotiate and execute an interlocal agreement with the University of Houston Downtown Center for Community Engagement and Service Learning Work-Study Internship Program. That was pulled by Trustee Bluford Daniels and Trustee Guidry. Bluford Daniels?
I pulled more items than Trustee Cruz this time. Gosh. She's rubbing off on me. On package page 23,
32?
F1, package page 23, in the
32?
subject. I'm sorry?
It's either 32 or 33.
I said 23.
I know.
It's wrong?
We're at F1.
This is F1.
It's the cover page, essentially, the agenda item printout page.
Agenda item.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah,
I don't have
it's
that
still
then.
gonna be 32. It's still 32.
Maybe I don't have it. I don't know.
F1, page 32. Okay, authority to negotiate and execute an interlocal agreement with the University of Houston Downtown Center for Community Engagement and Service Learning Work-Study Internship Program. I just had one question. Why just UHD? Could we not have included TSU as well as part of that? Or is it something in particular that does not allow us to include other universities?
I think that was in the Q&A.
So great question, Trustee Bluford Daniels.
Say that again.
I said, great question.
Thank you.
Trustee Bluford Daniels. We would love to work with TSU to do something. You know, we'd love to work with any higher education institute that would like to support us in this way. We're really excited about this partnership. It's the first of its kind with regard to wraparound. And so we would love to work with any higher education institute. This one in particular reached out to us and shared this opportunity, so we embraced it. But we're hopeful that we'll be able to expand it to TSU and to other institutions who may have the capacity and interest in working with us in this capacity.
And I appreciate that because especially Senator Miles has got millions of dollars in this last legislation that's going to go to TSU and to UH. So it may be an opportunity to utilize those young people over there as part of this training, especially because they come from the communities where we have most where the wraparound services are needed most, is what I'm trying to say. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
We're
Say
definitely
it
open
again.
to, I'm not going to say it again, but we're definitely open to the idea of multiple partners. I think we have to diversify our portfolio to look like, our student body. So I'm actually speaking Saturday with Prairie View at a event for nurses as well. So we definitely have, our ears, our eyes wide open to new and innovative partnerships as we continue forward.
And I appreciate that, because last month I said, does it make sense? You said no. So I was just double checking. But I think it's important because, as we talked about before, we can utilize some of those talents. We may be able to utilize some of those talents to fill in opportunities, for instance, with the teachers, the TAs. We may be able to use them to, I don't know what the criteria is, but to substitute and help and assist since they're majoring in education. Same thing with nurses, et cetera. So that's why I keep harping on that. So thank you, Madam President.
I have a question on that one. Do these schools have to reach out to you, or do you reach out to them?
It's a combination of both. We have partnerships. I mean, we have many partnerships with TSU in different capacities and with other institutions. In this particular case, they expressed an interest in working with wraparound because many of the graduates, for example, they have many of their graduates that already we hired. And so they said, how can we kind of create a pipeline of individuals who serve your students, but also could be potential future employees, right? But, some of these conversations are organic. Sometimes you're just in a room with someone and they come up with an idea. And we are always actively looking for partnerships. So this, again, is new and exciting. And I think, again, we're going to try to get as many partners as we can to build on this.
Thank you. Trustee Guidry?
Thank you. That was one of my questions. What we tried to increase on this particular agreement with other universities, but also in the negotiation process, who is going to determine the campuses that will receive these interns?
Can you restate your question?
Are we going to negotiate which campuses will receive these interns at their particular campuses, or are they going to be telling us we want to go to this school and not that school?
Yeah.
Can we negotiate?
The interesting thing is that it's a very interesting higher ed system here because it's decentralized. So even though you may have one campus that's the same university, they operate independently. So you have to work specifically with those independent campuses and work out agreements with those specific campuses. So if we're working with, the South Campus of HCC, that agreement is specific to the South Campus of HCC. So there's generally not a lot of mixing in these agreements. They're specific to a particular campus.
So in other words, because this is the downtown center, then we're going to be looking at interns that's within the vicinity of downtown. Is that what you're suggesting?
Not what I'm suggesting. I believe that's, given that it's a downtown agreement, I would expect that it would be driven by that particular campus in reference to what it looks like.
And then in that case, then I think we should probably reach out to more universities so that we can spread this availability around a little bit more than just within that vicinity. Thank you.
Trustee Dygard? Trustee Santos? Trustee Santos? Trustee Hernandez?
So my question is kind of similar to Trustee Guidry's. So we have these college students work study here in HISD. How is HISD going to deploy them into different HISD campuses? They're only going to be deployed to campuses near that university?
Not entirely, as the superintendent indicated. I think we have to work with growth around the students' availability. Some have transportation, some don't have transportation. I think there's going to be a natural propensity for them for some of those students to want to work close to where they live and where they can access school. But actually, we're working with the University of Houston downtown to help strategically place them where they're most needed. So we know that certain campuses have greater needs, and so we're going to be working with them, but we have to also take into account, of course, the limitations the students themselves have. But it's not, to your question, no, it's not only going to be downtown. They will be strategically placed based on need and also the willingness and ability of the interns themselves.
And they're working part-time?
That is correct.
And so do they have different level of responsibility than a regular wraparound specialist?
Correct. They're not a wraparound specialist.
okay.
They're working under a wraparound specialist. So they're actually being assigned to wraparound specialists, and they're actually mentoring and coaching them and leveraging them the way they best can. Because again, the idea is that then they eventually already get these skills, the training, so that we can hire them, right, and bring them on board as wraparound specialists in the future.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Trustee Sung?
So I want to compliment you on this partnership. I know it takes a lot of work to develop these partnerships, but I think they have tremendous opportunity. I mean, this is the best of all worlds. They are often HISD alumni. They are paid for by federal work study funds, which is great. And then they're coming to work in our schools and, as you've said, develop the pipeline. So this is really exciting. When I previously worked in the nonprofit world, we utilized work study students. UHD was a great source. TSU was a wonderful source. UH is also a great source and right in the heart of where we have many schools that could benefit from this kind of a partnership in Houston as well. So I'm excited for this as a first step and excited to see where this goes. Thank you.
Our next item for discussion is item I-4, approval of the December general fund budget amendment. That was Trustee Cruz.
Thank you. So I had submitted this on the Q&A. I'm looking at the line items. Oh, yeah. Okay, I see it now. So our excess, our deficiency, we're now at 300,000. When we adopted the budget in June, including the amendment, what was the deficit?
Chief Reed?
The deficit was $82 million when we adopted the budget in June.
That included the amendment that was made at the table.
It did not.
So including the amendment made at the table, what was the deficit?
115 million.
So how did we go from 115 million to 299 million?
So carryover encumbrances
Okay.
was $147 million alone. We have an assigned fund balance that we set those dollars aside in. So it's not a deficit that consumes the unassigned fund balance. So if you look at the bottom of this report, I've broken out the different fund balances that we have, right? So the fund balance, the unassigned fund balance beginning there, you see that 491 million?
Mm-hmm.
And then you see the $473 million
Wait, the 491 million, where is that?
at the very bottom of the schedule on page 58, packet page 58.
Oh, on the left side. I was looking on the right.
The
on
very
next
bottom, yeah.
column.
Yeah,
Okay,
left
okay,
side.
okay.
Yeah, the 491, and then our unassigned fund balance for the December 31st is 473. Okay, so it's going down about $18 million, right?
Okay,
Then you see the assigned fund balance that has the 123 million,
yes.
okay? That has carryover taken out of it from our beginning fund balance. So basically, we have dollars that are where we carry over the budget from the prior year, as well as the expenditures that'll eventually happen. So it's a net zero, but it's still an expenditure. I don't have a revenue, So I don't have a revenue up here that's higher. I have an expenditure that's higher, but the dollars have been set aside over, you could almost say, have been set aside over in the savings account that we'll pay for it from. But because the expenditures are higher than the revenues, you see that big jump in what looks like a deficit. But dollars are set aside for that expenditure.
So technically, then, we don't have that, that's not a real deficit. Is that what I'm hearing you say? I'm trying to understand.
So we have the true deficit is the 115 million, which was the 82 that we started with,
Yeah,
plus the 33
yes.
from the salary increases, plus the 9.3 for a time clock system.
Okay,
So it's really 124 of that 285 is the true operating deficit.
okay. That's helpful, thank you.
Okay, with no further business to discuss, the board meeting is now adjourned at 8:07 PM on December 2nd, 2021. Our next meeting is our regular monthly meeting on Thursday, December 9th, 2021. Thank you.